This video I'm working on an archery quiver. I haven't actually made one of these in 8 or 9 years probably, but somebody found an old listing on Etsy that we had for a quiver with a top part of it that's carved with like a western floral carving design. So I managed to dredge up my old pattern that I had. And this is some about 4-ounce oiled leather that I'm cutting this out of. And there's several pieces in this quiver. It's not probably the simplest quiver. The simplest archery quiver is basically you just take a piece of leather, fold it in half, and stitch the two sides, the bottom and the one side, and throw a strap on it. And you can call that a quiver. It's basically just a quick pocket for arrows. This one has several pieces, and it's going to be all laced together with 1/4-inch leather lace when it's finished. And of course, like I said, it's got the carved piece up on top. It's going to have a pouch on the front of it. So all in all, not the simplest quiver, but an interesting pattern for one. These are all the pouch pieces. There's a front, a back piece to the pouch, a gusset piece for the pouch, and the flap that covers the top of it. Then I pull out some 7 to 8 ounce veg tan leather for the straps and the top piece, and a little stiffener piece that goes in the bottom to make the bottom of the quiver a little bit more point proof when the arrow points go in there. The straps are going to be, I'll cut 2 of them basically. I'll cut this one and cut it in half, but it'll be 2 pieces basically about 25 inches long on each of them. And then we've got this odd shaped piece that's going to be our top, and then there's going to be 2 pieces that are how the straps attach. They'll get sewn onto the ends of the straps, and like I said, that little stiffener piece. And as usual, I just scratch everything with the scratch awl. I'll rough cut it real quick, and then I'll take it in to my normal work table rather than the kitchen table where I was doing this. And I'll be able to take it in and get all the fine cutting done. And obviously we're going to speed through some of this to keep this video from getting too long. But here you can kind of see the shapes of the pieces that I'm cutting. Those 2 are the ones for the straps to attach on with, and this is going to be the little stiffener piece in the bottom. And that first piece I cut is going to be the top of the quiver. We'll go ahead and punch some holes in all of these where they are going to lace together. Do some edge beveling, get ready to finish all those up once we get it all. It's not going to be dyed this time, it's going to actually be a natural color. But once we get it oiled up and finished with a clear coat finish. And here's the strap that I'm going to go ahead and cut some points on the ends of them, cut it in half. And I'll skive the ends where they're going to be attached onto those other pieces so that they'll be just a little bit cleaner transition rather than have a lump where you've got 2 thicknesses of leather. You can have your pieces go together a lot cleaner if you skive the ends. And then it's on to the other pieces that need holes punched in them. This is the pouch back and the bottom of the quiver. The front of the pouch and the gusset of the pouch do not need holes punched in them because I'm going to sew those on with the sewing machine. But the back of the pouch goes onto this quiver main body here, which I forgot to mark some of the holes for. And it'll go on with the lace whenever we go to do our final assembly. Alright, and you can see the different parts of the pouch here. That's the flap. We'll sew the corners together and then turn it right side out, and that makes a an interesting little flap. I'm going to skive all the edges because I'm going to roll those and fold them back on themselves to finish the edge. So I'm going to skive back about an inch or so and feather out to nothing on those edges, and then glue it back down on itself. And then I'll go back and top stitch it on the machine. While I got the glue out, I'll glue the stiffener piece into the bottom of the quiver as well. And we'll get our granite slab out and cobbler's hammer to really pound these to make them stick. The customer also requested some way to tie the bow onto some straps or something to tie the bow onto the side of the quiver. So I'm adding basically saddle strings. I'm going to put them on the same way you put on strings on a Western saddle. Punch 2 slots with a bag punch, and then use a leather concho and a bleed knot to attach them. And then it's on to tracing the pattern so that we can transfer it onto the leather and do about 2 hours worth of carving to put this floral pattern into the top piece of this quiver. And it's actually a floral pattern that I drew for a different project. It was not for the quiver, so it doesn't fit exactly right. I have to do some alterations to it. It's drawn for a purse that someone had me make because they saw the quiver and kind of liked it and wanted a purse made like it, only opened up and kind of twice the size of the quiver. So it wound up being just a little bit different size and shape when I finally made it into a purse the size that they wanted. But it's a nicer pattern than the one I had on the other quiver that they found the old Etsy listing for, so we're going to use this one. And of course I asked the customer, hey, would you prefer this? And they thought it was great. We're going to take a bit while we've got the water out to put some creases on our straps. So we're going to wet them down and just use our wing divider to run along it and put in some creases just to make a little bit of an edge to those straps so they're not entirely plain. And then we'll wet down our top piece here. I guess we could call it a finial on the top of the quiver. It's a decorative element up at the top that's going to be carved up. We're going to wet it down. We're going to use the wing divider to mark out our borders on it. And then we can start transferring our pattern on and actually get into the carving. I'm not going to go into much detail in the carving on this video because I was really not set up at the right angle to be able to see it. One trick though is I'm going to use some tape here to stabilize it. Okay, now we're going to start putting stuff together. So we're going to put our ends onto our straps, and one of these I do inverted. So basically the flesh side of the strap is turned the same direction as the grain side of the piece that it attaches on for the part that goes up on the top of the quiver, because it folds back down on itself. And we want our grain side of our strap to be the one that's showing. And I don't have a fancy concho cutter, so for the saddle string pieces, I'm going to just cut a concho by making a circle with my wing divider on a scrap piece of leather. And then use an old hole punch that I have ground in half. And it was about, it wasn't quite a 1/4 of an inch hole punch. And I just took it to the grinder and ground off half of it, so I only have an arch punch basically. And I'll just work my way around the circle until I get back to where I started. And now it's time to put a buckle on this strap. So it's just punch a couple holes, punch a bag punch between them, or you can punch 2 holes and cut between them to make that center where the buckle tongue goes. I'm going to make a quick little keeper loop just to add into the whole mishmash. And that's just a strip of leather that I've put some finish on and finished the edges, and I'll just use a staple to hold it together. And we're going to finish the edges of our strap while we've got them all out on the bench. These have been oiled with neatswood oil, and then the clear coat finish put on them is an old-fashioned neat lac, not the new stuff that's being sold at Tandy, but some stuff that I had laying around. Because I bought a whole bunch of it when it was discontinued originally. So this is the old solvent-based stuff. I didn't show that process because, again, you can't get the material anymore. There is something that I'll have to try eventually that's water-based, I guess. I know it's a low VOC version. I don't know if it works the same or not. But you have to thread your keeper loop on because I've got those pieces sewn on the other end, so you can't run it all the way down. You got to remember to put it on there before you put your buckle on and rivet it. Then you can slide your keeper loop up and put your second rivet in. And keeper loop may have not been entirely necessary with a center bar buckle like this, but I think it makes everything stay a little neater. Then I'm going to mark out some holes on the strap, on the other strap that the buckle is going to buckle to. I'll just use my wing divider for that. And I'm going to use an oval punch to punch the holes out. So you gotta, it's a little trickier to use an oval punch. You have to keep the ovals lined up straight. If you twist the punch just a little bit, they look really kind of off and weird. Now this is putting the saddle strings on. We're just going to put them through those slots that I cut for them. We're going to slide a leather concho down on them. And then I actually punched a hole in the center that I'm going to use to put a rivet on there just to hold it all together a little bit more. That's not necessary. It'll be tied together and hold all on its own. But it makes people feel better, I think, so I usually put one in there. Obviously in saddles, it's not always the case, but sometimes you will have a screw that's put through the center of your saddle strings. Sometimes it's just the saddle string is what's holding the skirt to the tree of the saddle. And this is a bleed knot. Basically, you just cut through the lace, cut about a, well, this is a 1/2 inch string, so you cut about a 1/2 inch slot through the lace on one piece, and you pull the other piece through that slot, and then you cut a 1/2 inch slot in the one that you just pulled through, and you pull the first one through it, and that locks it all together. I don't know why it's called a bleed knot, except for the fact that if you screw up while you're cutting this, you're gonna bleed. Somehow I lost the footage sewing together this pouch. Probably my fault, could have been the camera's, but more than likely mine. Pretty much I took the back piece and sewed the gusset to it, and then I turned it inside out and sewed the front piece on, and then got it all turned right side out before I sewed the flap on. And you just, the flap was that half circle piece with a rectangle stuck off of it, and you sew the rectangle to the sides of the half circle, and it makes this nice little top. I also top stitched around the edge of that flap, and of course put a little bag clasp on there. And the rest of the bag is all pretty simple to assemble. It's just going to be laced together with 1/4 inch lace and just a running stitch. And whenever you get to each end of it, you just want to take and tuck it under some of those stitches on the back side and trim it off. And that'll lock it all into place. It's just all held by friction, like most stitching. A little bit more of a rustic look using wide lace like this. And this is our top piece that we carved. It's also been oiled and finished with neat lac. Kind of my favorite finish for natural leather. And we're going to lace it on the same way, just a running stitch across and tuck the lace under at each end. And then we're going to sew on, this is the part that holds the top strap onto the bag. And this is when it all starts to really come together into a quiver. Because when we get down to the bottom of this, we're not going to go to the very bottom hole. We're going to jump across to the other side, and we're going to stitch it to the other side of the quiver's main body. And the other side of the top all at the same time. And we're going to stitch back up to the center line up at the top, and now we're in line with our main seam that goes down the back of the quiver. So we're just going to keep going with this lace and right on down till we get to where the bottom strap attaches on, which is the last it's the last 6 holes. You don't want to line it up with the very last hole. It makes putting the bottom on a little bit trickier, but it is possible you could put it down that far if you wanted. But we'll just, when we get down that direction, we just lace it in. This is where you decide if it's a right-handed or a left-handed quiver as well. It just depends on how you put that strap on. And then once we get all the way to the bottom, we're going to use still that same piece of lace we've been using, and we're going to transition right into the putting the bottom of the quiver on. And then just lace all the way around the bottom, and when we get done, just like before, we're going to tuck it under some of our laces. You can tuck it in between layers if you wanted to, try and hide it inside the bag, but I just left it on the bottom. And that is one slightly fancy archery quiver.